Hey everybody, welcome back to the Maddox podcast. This is season 2?
2.
Wow, we're still in season 2, episode 8. It's been a while, but it feels good to be back.
Is it 8? I think it's 9.
It's 8.
You sure?
8's a good number.
We just had this conversation off camera.
Okay. All right, because I thought I just looked at the channel the other day and it said 8.
Welcome to episode 8 or 9 of the Maddox podcast. We'll figure that out later. But it's been a while. It feels good to be back. A lot has happened in the last couple months, and I think we're finally ready to kind of discuss it now that we have a little more data on how it's affecting us. But first and foremost, today we are joined by Ricardo Velasco with Sequoia Real Estate.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you're here.
Oh, thank you.
So Ricardo is he's family, and I've known you my whole life.
Yeah, 100%.
So yeah. But you know, we work in real estate, and he has a lot of insight on what's going on in the industry right now with this whole buyer's agreement, representation thing. So
the NAR
settlement, right? So we're gonna dive into that. But first,
what are we drinking?
We're gonna try our. It's called Complicit. It's from Prisoner, and I need to read about it real quick.
Okay.
so
from our sponsors at Prisoner, manifest that.
I know, right? Yeah. So this is a Complicit red blend, and it's housed partially in High West bourbon and rye barrels. So it's a full-bodied blend of hand-picked Zinfandel and Sangiovese? What's it? Sangiovese. So anyway, let's try it. Let's.
Cheers, everybody.
Salud.
Cheers.
That's got a pretty color.
Oh, that's yummy.
That tastes really good. Yeah.
So I am getting plum from that.
I'm waiting for like the red steak to come out at this
I
point.
know.
This is so good.
Nothing like a nice glass of wine for breakfast.
Well, nobody knows that. Now they do.
Let me go first.
Yeah.
That's
Okay,
good.
cool. So let's move on to our topic for today.
All right, so we can dive right in.
Let's dive
what
right in.
happened? August 17th, big changes in real estate. The media has brought a lot of attention to it. Sellers think the rules have changed, think that's kind of a misconception. Buyers don't even know what's going on. What's happening?
Yeah.
So explain the NAR settlement a little bit for people who don't, maybe haven't heard of it yet.
Well, there's, as you mentioned, there's so many changes going on in the market, and I think this one, in my personal opinion, is probably the biggest news to hit the real estate market from the crash. I mean, it's that impactful that everyone has, and again, media's taken their own dialogue and the way they're presenting it, and for me, they're just really reading things and they don't really know much about it.
Yep.
And the ruling that has happened has impacted buyers, sellers, realtors, and how we're doing business today. And the big part of the conversation is the commission. And now we're not saying commission as we're saying concession. And again, it's at the end of the day, it's monies that now are being looked at from different angles. Sellers, since we've been in a business, have been paying a commission.
Sure.
And the commission has been divided up between the buyer and seller. And that's how we've been conducting business, since I've been in about 20 years now.
But the misconception is that it was not negotiable.
Well,
And
let's
that's-
break it down a little bit further. So the headlines are reading, sellers no longer have to pay a buyer's agent's commission. Right? But like you're saying, the sellers never truly had to pay the buyer's agent's commission. Why did that come into play? Give us a little bit of the history.
So is there a history about, I heard this from another agent, a long time ago, it was like this, where a buyer paid their buyer's agent, and the sellers paid their seller, listing agent, and then houses out on the market for a long time. And so the Department of Real Estate or whoever came up with this compensation to the other side for buyers, agents who had clients to bring those buyers to the house to see it, to the table to make offers. Homes started selling faster and for higher prices. So do you know, it might have been before your time when all that took place, but
where it takes me back, so to answer the question is this, that there's always been an incentive to bring buyers to your property to sell properties,
Right.
to your home. To the point that there was actually a time where people were giving away cars, giving away vacations.
Oh,
And I
interesting.
remember it distinctly, one example of a house that was, the Mercedes went with the
Came
house.
with it. Wow.
So,
Yeah.
so this compensation has always been created by a seller to drive interest to the property. And at times, like you alluded to, there were times in the slow markets where the seller would say, hey, we're going to provide an extra bonus if you come in and present an offer. So this compensation concession has been around for a long period of time. It's always been negotiable. It's always been transparent. The problem that we end up getting into from two perspectives. One, from a seller perspective, was that why should I pay the outside agent that's going to negotiate against my agent a fee? And so that became controversial, right? So someone took a stand, or people took a stand, like, I'm not paying the other agent any money. My agent's doing all the work, and I'm going to compensate my agent a certain concession. So that's I don't understand why I'm paying the other side. So that became a talking point, a legal issue. Okay, so pin it right there for a minute. The other side, from buyers' perspective, agents that represent buyers, all of a sudden started looking at the MLS, and there was the commission that was 2.5%, 3%, 1%. We don't know, right? Whatever
Sure.
that was. Unfortunately, what's happened is that there were some agents that steered clients away from commissions that were, say, under 2% or lower commissions.
Right.
I'd
For the
say
sake of-
about 2% or under.
Under, yeah.
So just for anybody who maybe doesn't know real estate, standard commission has always been about 6%. In some markets where prices increase rapidly, I would say it kind of became a little more standard for about 5 to 6%, depending on the house. So that was split between the listing agent and the buyer's agent. Typically about 3 and 3, or 2.5, 2.5, depending what the listing agent did, maybe 3 and 2.5, something like somewhere around there.
Right.
And now they're saying, like you just said, I'll pay my listing agent, the seller will pay the listing agent 2.5 to 3%, but I'm not paying the buyer's agent.
Correct.
And so now the buyer is left on the hook to figure out how to pay their own agent, which often buyers, can barely come up with their down payment and closing costs. I mean, 2.5% is roughly their closing costs. So that's doubling that. And now they have to figure out how to pay it, or it has to be negotiated. And that's where we get into all these new laws and all these new disclosures and forms and such.
100%. And to add to your point, so I'm going to finish the point. So the buyer's agents were now accused of steering their clients away from higher percentage commissions paid by the sellers. So this is how all of a sudden NAR decided that, listen, we're not going to provide that information anymore, therefore not letting agents not show properties where the commission isn't to their likings or their status.
Sure.
And so that's one of the talking issues, was that part. So that's why they eliminated that transparency of commission.
And that to me somewhat makes sense. I think this is a lot of new information for us, and it's definitely going to be that time of adapting and change.
Yeah.
But I do think that overall that makes sense, because I even know some agents, some great agents, that said, oh, it's only 2%. You don't want that. And they'll find reasons that a house isn't worth it for the buyer because it's just easier to do, because they know they're not making what everybody else is making on these other homes. And so I think in that point, it's fair, but it gets a little dicey with everything else, because it changes. It's a ripple effect. It changes a lot.
I would tell you this. I think that any agent who put their interest in front of the client's issue and not showed a house that was 1%,
Right.
Absolutely agree.
shouldn't be in the business.
Absolutely agree.
Absolutely,
And,
yeah.
and I think that's the problem that we have, is that if you're the agent that is preventing your client from either A, showing a house that has a low commission, you're doing your client a disservice.
Well, and the other point is that, even though it was marketed as maybe, let's say 1.5%, 2%, likewise, that is too negotiable.
100%.
So if you were to write on a property and you were to come in with a competitive offer and say, we're using these comps, this is where these homes sold, but they offer 2.5%, you can negotiate, and we have agents that have negotiated a better split for them. So it doesn't have to be that way, and I totally agree. I think it's an ethical thing if you're steering your clients from a home that you're not getting paid as much on. But there were ways around it, so I agree with that.
There was a lot of workarounds on it, but the good is that you knew what you were up against.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
You understood that the baseline started here. Mm-hmm. It's up to you to negotiate higher if possible, and if, say for example, they didn't want to come up on a commission, mm-hmm. you still had a fiduciary responsibility to your client mm-hmm. to do your job at the end of the day. And it's we can't control, like, if the seller feels this, then this is what they're going to put out there. Mm-hmm. They have that's their decision. That's their choice. This is their house, and this is what they feel they should pay the other side.
Yeah,
sure.
I agree.
And something we've always lived by is you put the client first. Don't worry about the money. The money will come.
100%.
You always put the client mm-hmm. first. You do the right thing, and that's just a lesson in life. You always try to do the right thing, and that energy will be matched.
Not just in real estate, but anything.
Exactly. That energy will come back to you.
Yeah.
Put good out there, it'll come back to you.
Absolutely.
I agree. Yeah, and again, that's one of the issues that I think spearheaded some of this lawsuit stuff that we're dealing with today.
Yeah.
Sure.
Go ahead.
So how does this change everything? A buyer comes to us. We can start even from open houses. A buyer used to be able to walk into an open house and just kind of view the home and get information.
And this is where I'm confused, because I did an open house the other day, and people, I've got my iPad on there for people to sign in, but then I had this one lady who's like, nope, I'm not signing in, and I'm just like, what do I do? Do I kick her out? Do I,
No, you just don't offer her any information, is what I'm understanding. If she has any questions, view the house, that's fine.
Yeah.
I kind of pose it as a safety thing. This seller has a right to know who's entering their home and viewing their home, especially if something goes missing, God forbid. But they have a right to know, and you can kind of pose it like that. You don't have to give me your email. You don't have to give me your phone number. At least give me your name. Give me something.
Right.
And if you're not willing to do that, sketchy.
How are you handling that?
I have a different approach, and my approach is this: that if someone doesn't want to sign in, they don't have to.
Okay.
They don't have to. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I feel that it's our jobs to create the relationship with individuals coming through that door. That's our job.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I get the safety part. That's a very good point. It's not their fault that all of a sudden these new laws that have been passed and new regulations been poured on them, that we expect them to all of a sudden abide by them, right? Mm-hmm. There has to be a wiggle room, mm-hmm. and I think that there's going to be extremes where you're going to have brokerages where they want these regulations to be enforced to the max.
Sure.
Right? Can't come in, can't do this, can't talk to you, blah, 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 blah. And it's going to create a lot of friction, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that we don't, as an industry, have the best reputation to begin with. Yeah. So if we take this hard stand to be the gatekeeper of these regulations, I don't think that's the right way. That won't be that. I'm not taking that approach. I'm going to properly explain, like, here are the new regulations. Yeah. Here's what you should do. We're here to explain this to you. You have an option to sign or not, right? And that's how I'm going to leave it there. Okay. People will sign in, and I just want it to be as normal, business as normal, mm-hmm. because I don't want to create, and we live in this new society or new era that people are so quick to post a negative review on you.
Oh, right, very true.
And I'm fearful of that. And I know there's these secret shoppers that they say, which, they talk about RESPA violations. I've never
right.
seen a RESPA cop or a RESPA right. gnome or whatever. And now I feel like, we have this fear mongo, like, if you don't enforce this, you don't do that, your brokerage is could be liable.
Sure.
Is it true or not? I don't know. But I will take the stand that I'm going to follow it to the T, and I recommend everyone out there be in compliance.
Sure. Yeah. The memes, I will say, the memes and the videos and everything.
They're pretty funny.
Spoofs, they're pretty funny. Yeah. They're pretty good that are coming out of this.
And again, I'm going to go back creating relationships. Don't create friction, create relationships.
I like that.
Make it easy for them.
I like that.
We don't like it.
Mm-hmm.
They don't like it. And so we have if you do want to know more about the property, I need you to sign this form, so this way I can freely talk to you.
That's a good approach. That's a really good approach.
And that's all right. And because You know how we feel when we're shopping, and we don't want to be tied in or locked into someone because we want to know who they are and if they're a right fit. And I think that's our job, is to create relationships and not friction.
It's true. How many times you walk into a store and they say, "Can I help you today?" And you're just like,
I know.
Just leave me.
I know.
So I get it. I get it on both sides. But that's what we do. We try to just talk to the people and just let them realize that we're not out to get you. We're not out to capture your info and spam you. It's just...
So now this kind of leads into another question topic about, say you get a lead on Zillow or somewhere and they want to see a house.
Sure.
And now they have to sign this agreement with you. What do you do? And people don't know us as it is, right? And used to, I would give somebody a couple free houses, basically. It's like, before we sign a buyer's agreement, meet me, let's go look at it, let's check things out. And if you feel comfortable with me and you want to move forward with me, let's sign a buyer's agreement. We'll, and then I'll start really working for you.
Absolutely.
So now what do we do? We got that Zillow lead.
Okay, so there's a couple of approaches, and I think I take a little bit somewhere in the middle on the approach, because I know that some brokerages out there are suggesting that we initially send them this buyer broker compensation agreement and they even want us to add the verbiage, if the buyer doesn't agree that the buyer agrees that the buyer agrees that their agent is entitled to compensation, and if the seller is not offering concessions for compensation, then they will not offer on that house. That's aggressive to me. That's going to steer so many people the wrong way, even though it doesn't have to be that dramatic. There is another form that we use. What's the title of it? It's the PSRA or something like that. Basically, it's a small showing agreement. You can see 3 properties within 30 days. It's the same kind of thing. And I've been kind of going back and forth with the verbiage, but basically just saying that buyer agrees that agent is entitled to compensation and will allow them to negotiate that on their behalf, or something to that effect. Concessions for that. Something to that effect.
And you can put that verbiage in there.
And I do put that in the additional terms, basically just letting them know, hey, I'm not tying you to paying this, 2.5%, 3%, but you do agree that I deserve to be paid for my job, and you are allowing me to negotiate that with the seller in the form of concessions to be paid to you to pay me.
Right.
So I'm going to take a different approach.
Okay.
The companies at Zillow and Redfin, because they're in this space of showing homes, right? And then they have a lot of agents that pay for leads. And their approach is that they have what they call the touring form. You can tour homes, no commitment.
The touring form.
There's a form for touring. You're going to tour the property. It goes to show you how much these companies, big corporations, care about the rules. They don't. They don't play in the same playing field as we do.
Right.
They have other forms that they use. So Carr came up with the touring form. I don't know if you know that. So it's a new form that basically says, I'm happy to show you this property. And it doesn't talk about compensation or nothing. It's a touring form that's out there, okay?
Okay.
And I'm going to go back to this, okay? And I think this is where the players as Redfin and Zillow and any other lead generation platforms are trying to create the relationship where it's not so restrictive, right? And so we have 2 messages that are out there. The message that NAR gives us as far as the broker buyer compensation, right? They want us to go out there and tell them, you got to pay me. You got to pay me.
Yeah.
And then you got Zillow and everyone else that says, you don't have to pay me. We're going to show you the home, right? So they want to create the relationship, and they want us to create the friction, right? I'm going back to, I'm going to create the relationship.
Yeah.
So I'm saying,
I didn't think of it like
I'm
that.
going to show you the house. It's okay. It's all good. And then next thing you know, I'm showing you 3 homes. I'm using the other form. Now we get to the point of like, and then you put the compensation in there as well. But then all of a sudden you got the BRBC, because now things are serious.
Right.
We developed a relationship. I showed you homes. We went through this form, that form. Now we're down here, right?
Sure.
And I'm going to say to you, look, here's what's going to happen. There's going to be sellers that are going to pay a concession, and there's others that are not going to pay a concession. I really don't know how this is going to iron out till we get to that point. Would you like for me to show you the houses that only pay a concession, so this way we don't have to talk about compensation from your side? And then they'll probably say yes. So let's start with those homes, right? And so I think there's a way that if you're able to navigate, negotiate the proper way, and create no friction between you and your client, you got a good path here to follow. But if you start sticking this right in front of their face, human nature is like, get back.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Get back.
that's how
I would be
feel-
like that.
That's how I already feel with the 3 properties, 30 days. It's like I'm just meeting you and I'm already having to discuss.
So is this new form you're talking about, that car?
Do you know what it's called?
I don't. I was gonna punch it up.
I have.
But I will. I don't. I can text my. I was gonna bring it. I should have had it ready.
So people out there that don't know
It's a torn form.
what this is, what these mean. So CAR is the California Association of Realtors, and NAR is the National Association of Realtors. And NAR is the one that set this whole thing, and they settled. It was a settlement.
It's a settlement.
It was a lawsuit and a settlement. So that's why we're not allowed anymore to post commission on the MLS.
I'm gonna text my.
Yeah, because I'd love to pull it up. I have
Yeah.
the other ones pulled up, and I'd like to see this touring form. I thought that the
And I think, this is new, right? And everybody's
It's
just
new.
getting used to this. I think things are going to start changing as we move along a little
they're
bit.
already proposing changes to the BRBC, the buyer broker, whatever it's called.
There's a backlash.
Representation agreement.
Because we as realtors, if you start setting all these areas of enforcing these regulations out there,
Right.
how do we compete? I mean, we got to play by the same playing field. Listen, when I was doing REOs and foreclosures, the banks used to put out their own contract. They didn't even look at the contract that CAR or NAR had in place. Didn't even look at it. Here's our new forms. And they looked at the other one as formality of having the RPA on top of theirs. You had to have theirs. Theirs was more important than the one that we had to implement. So anyway, the point is this, that it's really about being an agent that creates the best experience.
Yep.
This is horrible. I mean, in my personal opinion, I think it's gotten worse than better. But this is what happens when we live in a litigious country, that people are being sued. And anyway, everyone takes a different position. But at the end of the day, we're here to provide a service to our clients. And that's the most important thing to me. I understand you have brokerages that want to implement to the T these new laws and regulations. But to your point, we're all working through it.
Yeah.
There is no clear-cut answer. We're in this.
And this is a relational business. I mean,
Sure.
that's how we create relationships. That's how we build our businesses. So, like you said, I like this whole analogy about friction. Creating relationships don't create friction.
100%.
That's a great way of thinking about it. It's just, we're getting through this. We're learning through this, and things will change.
Definitely.
It will. And you have to take it one step further. Let's say hypothetically we have family members that want to go look at homes and everything, right? Or let's just take it the other way, where we have a strong client base, a database, a referral base that they'll sign anything, right? Because they trust us.
Right.
And we're properly explaining this. Here's the BRBC. Trust me, I'm going to do everything I can to have the other person pay. This is where we're at. This is a placeholder. So the whole thing is, how do you present it to your clients so they feel comfortable in you representing them, where they don't feel they have another additional surprise?
Sure.
So let's change the conversation back to the seller side.
Okay.
So the seller side is interesting, right? Because I heard through the media that we don't have to pay the other side. So how do we handle that? What is?
Let me take a big drink
Yeah,
of wine now.
because that's the other one, right? That we're not talking about today, and we should address that. as
Okay,
well.
so I had the perfect situation. I know you have a story too. My scenario was I had a buyer that purchased a couple years ago. I don't think she's going to watch this podcast. She was one of my worst buyers ever. And she reached out about 2 years later and said, hey, I'm in a position I need to sell. What do you charge? I know I haven't made a lot in the last 2 years. The market hasn't changed much. What are you going to charge? And so I laid it out to her, explaining, hey, it actually happens that there's a lot of changes. This is how things are happening now. And in so many words, much more eloquently expressed that, even though you are not liable for paying the other 2.5-3% to the buyer's agent, it's in your best interest to do so in order to have the property.
But you were never required to do that.
Well, you were never required to do that, correct? But although things have changed
It was a standard. It was, you want the most eyes on your property. This is how you do it, right?
Sure. And she came back and said, "I am reading up on this landmark case, and I understand now that I am not liable to pay the buyer's agent, so I will not be doing that. I will only pay you, whatever we agree upon, and I will not be paying the buyer's agent." And that was fine with me. I said, I don't know exactly what I said, but basically we got to the point where it was like, I don't think this is going to be a good fit for us because X, Y, and Z. And she responded back, "Yeah, I found somebody that'll take it for the 2.5. Okay, great.
Right.
More power to you." And I know you had a situation with a seller, and I love this one.
Well,
because you explained it so well. My conversation was never going to get there, and honestly, I didn't want her as a client.
Yeah.
Not to be, like that, but we had such a not great experience before, just with our personalities, and I was like, this is the perfect opportunity to have this discussion. I already know how it's going to turn out, and I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
I'm at peace with it. But your situation, I liked when you were telling me about your seller when she said, I will pay you, and I'll pay you when you represent me, and get into that.
Yes. So, interesting enough, I received a call from someone who wanted to sell a duplex. And again, and believe it or not, she had trading floor experience, worked back in the day for Dean Witter, and was very well read, very well versed, right? So she was really on top of things, right? Same thing. I've heard through the media, I don't have to pay a commission, and so I said to her, no, and this is all new, and I said, no, you're 100% right. That is, the ruling was as such. You having to pay a commission is an option. So we went through the whole concession paying and so forth, and she made it. Her stand was, I'm not going to pay the other side. Not doing it. I'm taking care of you, and I'm going to pay your commission when you represent me in my next transaction. But I refuse to pay the other side. So we came to that kind of the understanding to agree upon what she said at that point. So I said, well, let me send you the the listing agreement. So this way you can kind of see the new, because she's very well read and all that. And I sent her the listing agreement. And in the listing agreement, there's a part where it says compensation to listing agent, right? And or concession, whatever the word they use. So obviously you put your 3 or 2.5 right there. So there's nothing to the other side. But right underneath there is this thing of no representation, right? So it's they leave it. So in case, and here's where thing gets a little kind of cloudy, dicey in my opinion.
Yeah.
So let's say, for example, that I'm selling a house, and you have a buyer out there that would like to buy your house, and then they have an agent, and my client is not paying a concession, so the client's left out in the cold because they really want to buy the house. But there is a stipulation that if they decide to contact me direct, and I can say to my client, look, I'm not going to represent them, but I'm going to provide them the forms so they could represent themselves.
So they basically have to fill out the forms on their own.
They have to fill out the forms on their own. And underneath there's a little space that says what my fee would be to, and this is where it gets a little kind of, not to represent non-represented buyers how they present it, but there's a fee if I bring a non-represented buyer and I provide them all the information to submit an offer, you're going to pay me, let's just say, another 2.5, just for the sake, or a flat fee of $5,000, whatever it is. Can you imagine the client turns on and says, well, let me get this right. You're not representing them, but you want me to pay you. How does that work?
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
So now we're at this stalemate, or of lack of a better way of presenting it, because it stopped me. Yes, it's non-represented, but I still want to get paid. So what do you think the client's thinking, right? It could be, I'm playing kind of devil's advocate here, right? Because I could probably present it a different way.
Right.
And it's just so complex because you're providing this information to a buyer. You're trying to get them to obviously offer the best that they can on your client's property. So you are doing some work. You have no fiduciary duty to them.
Correct.
It's such a gray area.
Such a gray area. So here's Joe. Here's the purchase agreement. Fill it out. And here are the disclosures. Fill it out. And here's the inspection reports. Find out.
And so you're not representing them, so you're not explaining any of these things
Correct.
to them.
Yeah.
It makes no sense.
Makes no sense.
Right? So, okay.
And at the same time, does a seller want an unrepresented buyer purchasing their property? Because that just leaves you open to so much more. You don't have the protection or the advice of an agent. You don't have any of the backings of an agent. You don't have your E&O doesn't, work for them.
I feel like it opens up.
I mean, just for the seller, but
it opens up for so many more
it's
lawsuits.
just, yeah, I think so too. I think it's just too risky.
And then question comes, why do we have it there?
Yeah.
Right. Why is it there?
Well, because it has to be there by default, just because of the way everything else, like like we said, this trickles down. It's such a ripple effect. This one rule change seems so insignificant, but it affects the way we do everything.
I think you made a really good point about talking and educating our sellers. Do you really want to deal and have this loophole where someone comes in and no one's representing them, and we really can't advise them, and say you want to go in contract with them, but we're dealing with someone who's doesn't know the process correctly and could really hang your property for a long period of time. We don't know if they're the whole deal.
Yeah.
So do you?
Yeah.
Really
How does that even work with the lending and such? As a seller's agent, you're obviously talking to the lender and doing
Correct.
that, but you're not keeping up with them and following along with the process and making sure that we're. I don't know. Are you? That's where it gets dicey, because it's like,
Joe,
now I'm doing double the work.
Now
Right.
you're sitting in hey Joe, I'm sitting in a contingency removal because you have to remove your inspection contingency.
Well, what's that?
And they don't even know what that means. Yeah.
don't know what
Yeah.
Exactly.
What's that mean? Why am I doing it? Yeah.
Right. They don't realize that means that they lose their deposit if they back out.
So that's a sticking point, right? So that's on the listing agreement today, that we as agents who do listings have to properly explain that. But let's say you leave it blank, right? Let's say you don't do anything, and then you get someone on YouTube that comes in and says, "Real estate hack, find out how to buy a house without paying your agent and use this loophole." Anyway, so these are the things that we're all working through, that I find that we have to learn how to properly explain to our clients, especially representing sellers.
Yeah.
Be aware. So I'm putting a placeholder of $10,000 here just in case this situation happens. Or are you a savvy seller and say, "Listen, I got you. This is what we're going to do. If we have an unrepresented seller, this is what we're going to do. I'm going to take that unrepresented seller and refer them to another agent,
Buyer.
another buyer's agent, and that buyer agent is going to come in and you're going to be properly represented, and we're going to pay that agent X amount."
Sure.
Right? So that's the only way I could, in my mind, feel comfortable about doing this transaction with an unrepresented buyer. Now he has representation. We're good. I know so-and-so. Here we go. And I'll tell you right now that there's a lot of brokerages that are implementing this strategy. They are not talking about it, but they're like on teams, and the buyer agent is doing this, and it's going right over there, stays in house. No one talks about it, but it's happening.
Oh, of course.
So I mean, you have to have enough foresight to understand that this is what's going to happen. So they're not paying an agent to represent them. The seller is. So we're back to that.
Interesting.
It's all very interesting.
Yeah.
I know it gets really confusing, right? It's the time.
Well, and if it's confusing for us, you can
Yeah.
imagine how buyers are thinking about all this, and sellers, and well, the sellers just have in their mind, they're just thinking, well, I don't have to pay buyers agents anymore, which it's just doing a disservice to themselves.
I mean, luckily, I do have most of my sellers, or all of my sellers right now, that are saying, I want to do whatever it takes to sell the property.
Right.
The timing of this is kind of whack in my mind, because not only it went into effect in late August, mid-August, we hit this kind of end of the year. The natural ebbs and flows of the market are already kind of wonky at this time, right? We back to school, things kind of slow down. We're getting to the holidays. Interest rates haven't come down. It's an election year. There's just so many variables that are playing into kind of this. I don't know. Where do you think the market is? Let's segue just quickly into that.
Like right now?
Yeah. How do you guys feel about the market?